Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the 14th Leadership Skills Development Summit. If you've just joined us, you missed out on a bit, but it's about to get heated. And I hope you are still visiting our virtual exhibition summit. And also as you walk in with your laptop and your fingers, you'll probably be exposed to some of the stands and the brands and companies that are there. Please do visit it. And don't forget to hashtag Skills Summit 2021. I am privileged and honored to introduce our last panel for the day. The panel discussion is vocational and technical skills as a driver of entrepreneurship and employment. And it will be facilitated by Ms. Gizelle Mclntyre, who is the group HR manager at Nimtech. Yes, sorry, I said McIntyre instead of McIntyre. So welcome to you, Gizelle, and over to you as you'll be introducing our panelists, and we look forward to hearing what you guys have to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Tabang. Welcome to the panelists, and good afternoon to everyone who's joined in. Our topic is probably the most heated of all of them. I did really enjoy the previous panelists though. So we also have our work cut out for us, if any of you were looking at that one. So what I'd like to do is just to let each one of you have a moment or two just to introduce where you are from. But before we do that, just to highlight that we're speaking specifically about vocational and technical skills and development of that in terms of building on self-employment, entrepreneurship, and employment. You'll notice I add in self-employment because I sometimes think we forget about the one-man show, who is quite frankly putting food on his or her table, but is not going to create a company as an entrepreneur that would then employ a whole bunch of other people. So if that can just perhaps get the show going, and perhaps Abe, seeing as you are on my left and first on my screen, if you could perhaps just start by introducing yourself and what exactly it is that you would like to bring to the table today in our panel. Abe, can you just unmute yourself, please?
Thank you for that, Gizelle. Good afternoon, Program Director.
Recording in progress.
And all the partners in the room and the panelists. I am Abram Oliver, and I'm representing Valsbeek colleagues. We are based here in the Western Cape, the Cape Town Metropole, one of 3 TVET colleges. And we are speaking towards, I have unmuted myself. Can you not hear me, Gizelle? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you clearly, thanks.
Awesome. I think I am in a loop here.
Okay, it looks like Abram's having a bit of trouble there. Yershen, perhaps let's try you first and see if we can come back to Abram then.
Well, thank you very much, Gizelle, and a very good afternoon to all the panelists and the colleagues on the very exciting Skills Development Summit. I'm the current Chief Executive Officer for the Chemical Industries Sector Education and Training Authority, referred to as CHEETA, which facilitates a large number of skills development and training programs in the chemical sector. I am hoping, Gizelle, that we would get into, as you said, the conversation around vocational and technical skills that are required for the young entrepreneurs, but since it's Youth Month in particular, what needs to be done for youth entrepreneurship as an apex priority for the country, for that matter. I'll be guided by you, but I think for me, first and foremost, is just we certainly are looking at a need to reimagine, for me at least, skills development in a digital age. And hopefully we'll get an opportunity to expand more about that through the conversation. Thanks, Gizelle.
Thank you very much. And yes, I definitely have a soft spot for the youth, and I do believe we should be looking at it this close to Youth Day. Thank you. Abraham, is your mic working now again? Shall we give you another go before we get to Simphiwe?
Thank you, Gizelle. Can you hear me clearly now?
Yes,
Awesome.
I definitely can.
Apologies for that audio delay. I'm Abraham Oliver, and I'm quite excited to be here today to represent Valsby Colleges. We are one of the only TVET colleges in the Western Cape that have an operational center for entrepreneurship. So our focus is to look at how do we assist young people to use their artisanal skills and transfer that into a business that speaks to the needs within the community by adding value. I particularly want to focus on mindset. So how do we transfer the shift from a job seeker mindset to a job creator mindset, particularly in the month of youth, with the background of the high youth unemployment. So that is how do we interface entrepreneurial skills to all the engineering and other artisanal skills.
Thank you. Yes, that will be most interesting to look at. Simphiwe, welcome. If you could perhaps just give us a few words as well before we get started.
Good afternoon, Gizelle, and good afternoon to colleagues. The name is Simphiwe Thobela, Chairman of the Board of MICT. As you would know, MICT has got a few subsectors that include ICT, media and communication technologies, and advertising and the film industry. And in the context of the 4IR, and to be brief, I have a sense that actually MICT CETA cuts across every single industry, because if you look at digitization and automation, we got to be right at the cutting edge of the developments there. So that's our focus and presence, and I would like to just stop at that for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm sure for any of you looking at this now, you will notice there were other names on the list. Some people have unfortunately not been able to join, but I have a feeling that between these three gentlemen, we're going to have a very interesting session. So I'm going to throw out the first component and perhaps just bring in a little of my own personal experience. At Nemtech, we are manufacturing the manufacturing environment. In fact, if you go and have a look at your electric fence, you'll probably see our name on your electric fence somewhere on the little yellow sign. And one of the things that we do is we're an accredited skills development provider for electrical fence installers. So Nemtech doesn't install fences. We train the electrical fence installers that come to your house. And the reason for that is between us and many other manufacturers in our environments of creating that platform of skill for people who do want to be self-employed, entrepreneurial. Some people obviously are doing that because they've had no choice in the matter, and especially in the last year and a half, we've had a tremendous amount of people who are no longer employed formally. But there are also massive companies who would make use of that for employment's sake. And so my question is, what are the skills, and you come from different sectors, and that's really why I want to ask the question. So what are the skills that as a population, as a country, even as a continent and as a world, what are the skills we should be looking for that will allow someone to go, I cannot find a job in the world of formal employment, or I'm looking for a specific kind of environment where I will fit as a person, where I can flourish with a skill that I can obtain that has relevance and is benchmarked. I'm a believer in the landscape of skills development. And what is it that I can go and look for? What should I be focusing on, especially as the youth of today? So perhaps if we could start with Yershen again, and then go to Simphiwe, and then to Abraham, if we could do it in that order this time, if you're okay with that.
Okay, thank you, Gizelle, for the question, and also to kickstart the discussions. I think certainly what we found, at least in the chemical industry space, and I want to perhaps build on what my colleague, Mr. Thobela, has indicated, digital skills and digital literacy is now, becoming a top priority for success. And so being able to use a device and to use it well, being able to access technology and bridge the digital divide and not make the wrong assumptions that everyone does have access to the internet for that matter, or for access to various infrastructure. I think it's quite a top priority for success if we're talking skills development. And so I think first and foremost for me is a change in gear from your traditional skills towards basic digital and digital literacy skills going forward. But that, what we're also finding, we did a focus group study with a number of companies in the pharmaceuticals subsector, which falls under us as the chemical CETA. And we looked at channel delivery managers in particular. And a number of the channel delivery managers lacked basic skills in the sense of resource management skills, for example, or looking at communication skills, basic negotiation skills for that matter. So in as much as your technical skills are quite essential for success, what we're finding is that there are critical skills gaps. And we have identified those as a chemical CETA. And these pertain to collaborative problem solving, for example, which is becoming more essential for success. And if you look at your entrepreneurs, for that matter, a recent partnership in collaboration with the University of Johannesburg, which we graduated 80 entrepreneurs in chemical detergents manufacturing, soap manufacturing, and cosmetics manufacturing. And the results of that were quite phenomenal, where we had more than 25% of those SMMEs actually having increased their revenues by more than 50% in 1 year. And again, it was not just the technical skills training, but it was your business skills training. It was accompanied by an NQF level 5, which included coaching, which included group mentorship from your master's students at the University of Johannesburg. So in essence, what we found from those 2 case studies is that it's really dependent on having a multi-pronged approach and a variety of skills, both technical, but included in that is your basic communication, collaboration, problem solving, and critical skills gaps, which are becoming more essential for success, especially for those venturing into entrepreneurship. Thanks, Gizelle.
Thank you, Yershen. Very interesting. And yes, I'm very glad to see that the one-dimensional new venture creation has moved a little further into something that's more holistic, because it is very true. If you don't create some of the additional skills necessary, anyone who's been in business and worked in the world of work will know that you can't just have that one thing. You need to have many. So very, very interesting. Simphiwe, your take on it?
Yep, thanks. I'm just going to add on what Yershen has addressed. But I think there's, right from the beginning, one of the key things that I think the country needs to address is numeracy skills. I think for different sectors of the economy, without addressing numeracy skills, we will have a problem with the supply of different set of skills across different sectors of the economy. And I think it's a very fundamental thing that probably when we have time, we can go back and ask about the structure of the education system, whether it produces what we expect it to produce, and whether the teachers that are supposed to produce the skills that we require are actually adequately equipped for the necessary skills. That's the first part. The second part is digital skills, and I think the digital skills, of course, is linked to the first part that I've just addressed, the numeracy skills. Everything is going to work back to it in one form or the other. But digital skills, and my sense is that we've got different kinds of problems if you look at the country, because access to internet would enhance that digital skill that you're talking about. When we have broadband access, which is very limited, and internet generally that is limited, it doesn't help you enough to address the issue of access to digital platforms and therefore developing digital skills. It more affects the rural and the poor. And the divide there, the digital divide is very still there to see for us all, and which is why I believe that the ERRP, Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, addresses amongst other things the focuses the skills development to dealing with the race, the class, the geography, and so on, because those are areas that are hit the most, because it's a preserve of the largely urban areas that you would have access to these digital skills. I think for me, those are the things that we need to be addressing. And if we are able to deal with that part, we'll be able to then respond to various other aspects of the sector requirements in terms of skill. Thank you.
Yes, wow, what an interesting point, and so true. I think perhaps that's what we're trying to encourage, is entrepreneurs who know how to build on those platforms and to build within the rural areas in those environments. I always remember the beautiful story of the young man in Zambia who built his own Wi-Fi pretty much from nothing. And you almost want those kind of things to start happening. And perhaps that is, again, what we need to be encouraging, is to people think outside of the box of, oh, well, now there's no mug and bean here. So I can't. Abraham, your ideas?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's a very thought-provoking question in terms of skills. When we look at our young people today, we are particularly looking at how do they blend their core skills with soft skills? How do they blend their logic with creativity? How do they increase their imagination? There's the Sustainable Development Goals. They're coming from communities where there are problems. And how do they apply that logic, the technical skills that they've learned in order to solve that problem? So it's a lot of, as you've mentioned, out of the box thinking, innovativeness, because as the world is changing, the only constant is change. We are in a pandemic, and how do I now think differently about the tools that I have? How do I use the tools that I've got in such a way to solve a problem? And it was mentioned earlier that we must understand our reality. And our reality speaks to a shrinking economy out there, not having enough jobs. But how do I now use what I have? I can't go back, but I can look at the future and change my destiny. So for me, it's a crossover between those core skills that you've got with creativity skills. So logic and creativity, left brain, right brain, connecting with one another, understanding market economics, and how do I then step into this space and add value? Because I think we must all become active citizens, and active citizenship means making a difference where I am with the skill set that I have.
Well said. Okay, so we know there are skills that are needed. Now, where do we get them? I mean, I'm not necessarily now asking you to advertise your sector, but just as leaders and thought leaders in your environments as well. So I am in Kuruman. I have finished matric, thankfully. Now, what do I do? I mean, where do I go? How do I now create anything? How do I make sure that I'm realistic in terms of what I'm doing? I chose Kuruman for a reason. I did a lot of coaching there in my younger days for some other reason. And one of the things that you find, especially in areas where there isn't a lot of urban assistance and help, like we have in the Joburgs of the world, is that young people are extremely over idealistic, let's make it soft, in terms of what it is that they're going to be able to go and do one day in their lives. There's still so many of them that don't know about learnerships, that don't understand what kinds of systems are in place. What can we do to help get the message out there? Perhaps, Yershen, if we just keep the rotation going and start with you again.
Thanks, Gizelle, again for that question. I think very importantly, especially, I'm glad you used an example such as Kuruman, because we don't do. Let me rather say we do a lot for the rural communities, but perhaps we could do more in terms of higher impact projects to ensure that we get larger numbers of our rural students. I suppose it starts with, again, I think Mr. Thobela made a very important point. Let's start at the basic education level. Career guidance is one of the 8 strategic outcomes that we have as CETAs, ensuring career guidance is provided for learners. Many learners in the chemical sector do not know what a chemical operator does. So how do you become a chemical plant operator, for example? I'm using the example of chemical plant operator. It's one of our top 3 skills in the sector right now. So the possibility of actually gaining a job once you're finished with your qualification is much higher than any other occupation. So our top 3 occupations currently are for chemical engineers, boiler makers, and for chemical plant operators. More than 8,000 jobs exist for chemical plant operators. So I think it starts with the career guidance so creating a pipeline for change, providing information at a very basic level, ensuring the young people understand what options they have. If you speak to those in our sector, they'll tell you we've got one of the best mechatronics qualification, to the extent that the Germans actually come to us to ask us, how do you devise a framework for mechatronics? But many young people do not understand what is mechatronics, how do I get involved in mechatronics, what is the courses I need to take at a basic education level, and then excel in those courses. And so creating a culture of excellence at the very school foundation, so that when you are able to then apply, we then need to provide the support, whether it be bursaries for you to apply and marketing those bursaries adequately. And so working together in collaboration with our TVET colleges, with universities, etc. I think greater collaboration is another success factor for me, because once you collaborate more, you are able to disseminate more information and increase impact going forward. And so, we create a pipeline for success where you're able to get bursaries. But what we've also found in the new intervention on our side and across many other CETAs as well, is you could, on the one hand, embrace new technologies as well. We've embraced, as CHETA, virtual reality simulated training, VR simulated training. In the next 5 months, we hope to roll this out into rural communities in particular. So as a young person in Kuruman, you don't have to go to a plant in Joburg or in Durban, where most chemical facilities are located. But you can actually undertake a 3 to 4 month training course in a virtually simulated environment to be a welder, and then combine that with a 1 or 2 week program where you have actual work experience. And so the risks are less, the costs are less for industry, but more so a young learner in Kuruman is able to receive training which they would not have otherwise received, because there are no chemical plants really operating in Kuruman, as most of them are in certain designated. So I think it's combining new technology and addressing the bottlenecks as well that exist. And I think my last point would be, we're getting closer to industry, working closer with industry and understanding what industry wants, their needs, and then having these new programs. I mean, right now we are assisting unblocking a bottleneck for student debt. Many chemical engineers are unable to get their certificates and acquire a job because they were unable to pay their student debts from university. So once you unblock those blockages, you create this pipeline for success, and then work closer with industry to understand what are their needs and priorities, not now, but going into the future. I think just one last point, Gizelle, from my side. Our petroleum subsector, to give you an example, has said to us that in the next 5 to 10 years, they see increasing growth in the hydrogen economy. And as the hydrogen economy grows, what are the skill sets that need to be accompanied, and the skills, occupations to accompany the growth in the hydrogen economy? So as we work closer with our petroleum subsector, we then have skills plans aligned to the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, but aligned to the growing needs of business and enterprise going forward. Thanks, Gizelle.
Thank you. Yes, and I think building on what you've said about getting industry to buy in. I think that's a core function. You know, I've always stood with my feet in both the CETA environment and the world of work environment, and it's always the one plea is please listen to what industry actually wants. You know, that the actual employer wants, and to make sure that the skills are vocational in nature, that they are actually connected to industry and to what industry needs, and that you are not teaching someone to fault find on a piece of equipment that hasn't been in existence for 20 years in industry. So it's good to see and to hear that is what is happening, and hopefully in that way encourage young people as well to also take their heads out of the sand. And, you know, if you only know about 5 jobs, you're only going to try and look for 5 jobs. So I agree with you. I have a true passion for us making sure people are aware that there are so many careers out there, and not just the 5 that you personally happen to be aware of. Simphiwe, your thoughts?
Probably let's extend the point by Yershen, which is very important, collaboration and partnerships. It's a very central point to the question. If I'm going to make an example, at MICT, the 4 IR qualifications that we have developed and approved recently, all those were done in collaboration with the industry. You get the industry because that's the pace at which things are changing. If you sit in your ivory tower and develop these qualifications with the hope that you will be responding, the industry, by the time you approve that, the industry has moved on. And yet the most important thing is to keep pace with them, and that partnership shouldn't be an accidental and incidental partnership, but it must be a thoroughgoing partnership. And they help you to kind of spread that word about the possibilities that are out there of new skills that are available and new things that youth could be interested in taking up. That's the first point. The second point is that one area that I think we are not doing extremely well on as a country is what the minister cautions us about. The Minister Nzimande says these sitters are not sitters of Johannesburg, of Sandton. These sitters are sitters of the country, and they have to be found and in practical ways everywhere, not just having an office, but programs must be there that raise awareness amongst the people in a particular geographic space. In this case, I've said, we've said as a board to management, look, if you do not understand what is the what are economic realities of Kuruman as an example, and you are unable to provide responses there, it means you got to be very conscious in understanding what makes Kuruman tick, and therefore what sort of digital skills would be required there. That means working closer to the people there, the industry and the society, the schools in the area. Then you start understanding what needs to be provided, so that when you structure your programs, when you structure your qualifications, when you structure your budget, you are responding to a need. You're not just ticking box that we've got these qualifications, we've got this amount of money, but what does it solve in the society? That means going out there. We've just recently, as the last point on this point, we've just gone out to Muteo College recently, about 3 weeks ago, which has got various campuses around Bloemfontein. And the sort of information that you start getting there from the school management, the TVET college management and the learners, you start understanding that we are not actually giving adequate information that we should be giving. And we're not getting solutions enough that we should be getting, because some of the solutions come from the very people that you are actually sharing information with. And that becomes a very important thing to strengthen that partnership. Lastly, the partnerships between sitters themselves. I'm speaking from a sitter point of view now, and I'm not going to emphasize some of the points that Yershen made, adopting TVET colleges and so on. But then across the sitters, I think we need to strengthen partnerships, because as I was saying in my opening, for example, the ICT and digitization cuts across different industries, and no one sitter is likely to go on its own and solve all the problems. In all likelihood, we would have to be in partnership. I was making an example elsewhere in another summit that I was speaking on just about 2 weeks ago, that I'm a board member amongst others in a tea estate that's in rural areas in the Eastern Cape. But then the cost that we are incurring there of production, the cost of production far exceeds the returns on investment that we make. But one of the things, it's digitizing that. I need MER-SITA to be there. I need AgriSITA to be there. And we can join together as a MyCT-SITA and probably any other SITA that's relevant to ensure that we bring the skill there. Without that, we are unable to then resolve the problems. It means all of us have to go out there and sell what we have and inform the communities of what we do and what we are potentially doing and what the industry is expecting from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Simphiwe. It's always nice to see when someone is actually passionate about their environment. I think people get a little angry with the SITAs very often because there's a lot of bureaucracy, but it's so nice to have a platform like this where people can also see that there is passion and belief and truth. And I particularly liked your what does it solve aspect of a qualification. And perhaps, Abram, that's good for you because you are an FET.
Indeed, Gizelle. I want to pick up what Simphiwe said and Yershen said on 2 points in terms of responsiveness and partnership. I think we need to co-create if we want to ensure that our economy gets revitalized. And Valsbeck College took a strategic decision when they looked at being a leader in skills development, being responsive to the economy, that the gateway to education is one, further education. The gateway to self-employment is also very meaningful. But the third decision was taken, a gateway to self-employment. And in order to enhance that and to make that the reality, we had to connect with partners, the Department of Small Business Development on board to create a center for entrepreneurship. And at the center, we look at how do we equip those with the skill set that they've acquired through vocational and technical skills to now add business learning to it, understanding of the economy. How do we mentor them? Because a lot of our students don't have any mentors. They don't have any role models. So how do we mentor them? How do we coach them? But a business is not a business if there's not a market. So how do we look at market linkages? How do we look at financial linkages? And we work closely with the NYDA to support young people with grants. We work closely with CEDA for non-financial support. But very importantly, which I want to add on because we spoke about skills earlier on, when you develop a business, the jockey is the most influential person in that business. It's that individual, the entrepreneur. And how do we develop that entrepreneur to believe in himself, to understand what he's best at? And talking to partnerships, in our journey, we've worked closely with partners, for example, the Beers, Enterprise Supply Development, and getting these young technicians, a young graduate who have completed his business in welding, and now he's providing services to these corporates. But also partners such as W&R SITA, where they're looking at, there's a lot of informal traders who need support. We will then come on board, and how do we sustain them now, particularly last year during COVID, when COVID hit March 2020, we started in August 2020 with that particular project. So again, I think responsiveness is critical, but partnership makes the reality and your vision comes through. So I want to add on to this point, Gizelle, that entrepreneurship is a strategic imperative, and our focus is how do we look at vocational and technical skills as a driver of entrepreneurship and employment. And because it's a strategic imperative, I think it is important that it should be part of colleges, it should be part of the bigger community out there, be it CETAs, be it government, and how do we collectively come together to make sure that we make a difference, that we knock or at least mitigate this huge unemployment rate. If we look at the expanded unemployment rate for young people, which is close to 60 to 70%. So I want to agree with Simphiwe and Yershen that strategic partnerships is critical, but responsiveness to what is needed at this time so that we can ensure that our economy gets back on track and young people can look at the future with hope, but can also look at themselves and say, how do I shift my mind in order to be a co-creator and create a job for myself?
Well said. Yes, I think we have made an important point in this panel that this is not something that can be done by one particular person, one particular sector. It can't be done by public, it can't be done by private. It needs to be done as something that is a holistic approach. And perhaps if we even just think about it, if we just think of ourselves as parents and as aunts and uncles, perhaps that's where we should be looking at, is what is it that we are all doing in our everyday lives that will allow us to collaborate to bring together all of these different components. I think entrepreneurship for a very long time was sort of seen as the golden bullet that would kill unemployment. I still don't know if that can honestly be true, because technically the discussion is that an entrepreneur creates employment. So how does it kill unemployment when it has to first build itself into that? And perhaps that's where we are going. We perhaps need to be focusing back on the little things. So my last question for today, because unfortunately we have time limits, is what about skills programs? I've always been a big believer, both from a skills development provider point of view, but also from an industry point of view. You know, the Nemtechs of the world can't send people away for 2 years, 1 year, 6 months, whatever. You know, training that is done by, especially by people we already have employed, needs to be fast and needs to be very specific in terms of what it is that we're doing. We don't have time. And even though we would love to, we don't have the will to be able to say, let's take away somebody for 3 years to go and finish a qualification. Things are here and now. The just-in-time age-old concept of training is there. But at the same time, and I'm most definitely an ambassador of it, I want benchmarked. I want best. I don't want to send my staff on something, or my new learners in an environment on something that was thumbsucked on a Saturday afternoon by someone. So how do we build to a point where there's a partnership between industry and all of the different sectors, the colleges, even the universities, to get those just-in-time skills? We live in a YouTube environment. Most people learn how to change a tire nowadays by looking at a YouTube video. So how are we building so that these future-focused, just-in-time components become part of our lives? And perhaps, Yershen, if we can start with you again.
Thanks, Gizelle. I'm glad you're now addressing the question of how. You know, we've talked a lot about the what and the why, but I think it's an important question to ask. And I think one of the exciting new ways of innovation, and so for me, I think the solution really lies in innovation-driven skills development, where in this current environment, I think Abraham and Simphiwe also touched upon it, highly volatile, highly complex, people going back to the concept of the VUCA environment of 1987, bringing it back to today's context. So if you look at today's context, we certainly need to innovate more. And as we innovate, then look at new ways of thinking and doing about skills development. And I agree with you, the skills programs over and above our learnerships, our internships, and our traditional artisan development programs, which are essential. And I think we also have an artisan center of specialization with false pay on rigors, for example. But as that continues, you know, I've had a number of discussions with our gas manufacturing sector, and just to illustrate the point, in which, you know, industry identified that there's a need, for example, for maintenance planners in the sector of gas manufacturing. And we then developed a new concept related to the question of how do we collaborate? How do we, you know, put into practice Because I don't think it's sufficient to sign collaborative agreements and then they pile up on your table with nothing much happening on the ground. Yes, we should be signing collaborative agreements, and we should also look at non-sector-based collaborative agreements. I really like what Mr. Thobela has said, because why should we as a chemical SETA focus on the chemical SETA role players or stakeholders? Surely we could look at non-industry partners and collaborations, partnering with the banks, partnering with IT companies, which are not within our sector, but offer significant increase in value creation for that matter. And so one of the concepts we're exploring is an industry hub. And what these innovation industry hubs would bring industry closer in a 6-month bootcamp type program, whereby in a very short space of time, you work closer with industry to ensure the standards are met, and you at the same time partner with institutions of higher learning, which are able to provide not only the qualification, but the credentials that would be required, because the credential is also quite important for that matter. And whether it's working with your TVET colleges, or your institutions of higher learning, together with industry in a 6-month type of industry hub, that would in a very short space of time, using technology and new innovative ways, provide a skills program, whether it be for maintenance planning, as an example that I've given you in our sector, or it could be for your traditional or new and emerging skills. And I think just I highlighted that as an illustration of how I think if we want to address the issue of collaboration, we could look at new innovative concepts such as industry hubs. And linked to that, we had a discussion with Sasol, which is our largest stakeholder in the chemical sector. And they said to us that as an industry, not only in their perspective, there's a rising demand for data analysts. So it's not just about welders and riggers anymore. It's also about new and emerging occupations such as data analysts. And we need skills programs for these type of occupations such as data analysts, which the industry requires more than anything else. So I think for me, just to answer your question, I do agree we need to scale up skills programs and perhaps take new innovative ways which are non-sector based, more alternative thinking, different forms of thinking, and more tech-driven type of skills programs, digital skills programs for the future. Thanks, Giselle.
Thank you very much. Simphiwe, your thoughts?
Right. I think the key thing here is industry, because they would know best about what's required when. And so I'll make an example. We've been working, for example, with the Sandra, which is a South African association of device repairers, and we're developing a qualification there and skills programs that must respond to what they require. But then you would know the cell phone industry, as an example, it's changing quite rapidly. And if you then stick to the old that you knew 18 months ago, and new things come, and you're still stuck on that, and you do not know where the industry is, in all likelihood, you will be left behind and be irrelevant. That's one. Two is that I had a meeting with the QCTO recently, and I was raising a point about the qualifications generally, that you've got terms, qualifications that outlive their relevance. And it makes no sense to have some of the qualifications that you still have now, even those that need to be renewed, they don't get renewed, or those that have to have changes here and there, it doesn't happen in time. And I think we need to be agile a bit as training authorities, and in the whole value chain has to be a little bit agile and be responsive to what the changes are in the market. With the pandemic that has just hit us now, it has proven quite obviously that a sluggish being sluggish in taking action is going to be very dire and probably will have dire consequences for the entire economy, as it were. So it is very important that we should think about agility and relevance every single time when we respond to the industry and the market requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Simphiwe. Yes, I think agile, hey, being fast on our feet for what we're doing, and perhaps cutting through some of the bureaucracy, which I'm sure, you know, anyone in any skills environment knows there are certain things that have to be there, but I do think we need to be looking at that. Abram, your thoughts?
Yes, Gizelle, I think Thobela mentioned it, that agility, how do we, and we focus on that a lot. We call it, how do you fail fast and learn fast? Because you can't take 6 months to find out that this idea is not working. So we have designed a structured non-credit bearing program in partnership with our advisory board, which consists of the universities, CPUT, consists of DDAT, Department of Economic Development and Tourism, CEDA, etc., to come up with a program. And we have examples of graduates who've completed their masters in HR, but now wants to start up an HR business. So how do we get them going within that 6 months? This person have been earning an income, so he now needs to get to market. And how do we shorten this runway for this particular individual? We then bring on mentors from Rotary International to say, I have worked in my own business for 30 to 40 years. How do I come alongside and be the mirror for this individual, be a soundboard so that he or she don't make the wrong decisions? Because as you know, if you make a wrong decision, that might be cutthroat in terms of a small business and you lose all your money. And I like what Yershen said in terms of the golden circle. We've looked at the why, the what, but now we look at the how. And one of the activations that we look at particularly is to have annual activations where we ask young people to think innovatively, come up with an idea, and we've partnered with future managers who supply entrepreneurial books, and we're saying, that curriculum haven't changed, but let's see how we can now get these young people not to think about an idea for a business plan, for a summative assessment, but think of an idea that will solve a real problem. And that is bridging the gap between theory and reality of what's happening within the world of work. We've just started the Mersita project for 30 unemployed youth. And I must say, we're in our first month of starting up with them. There are 13 graduates within that cohort. We asked them, what is the challenge? They could not secure a job because their relevance in terms of experience they don't have, the gap between what they've studied and what is now required in the workplace. So again, you need skills program that is responsive and that is agile. I also just want to add as a conclusion, as an incubator, and I think Pillay alluded to that we have now are looking at putting in a coding lab and a digital hub, drone facility, because we must also be responsive to the future. And how do we respond to that future? And in terms of developing that program, we need to work with the experts in that field so that we can transfer that 3-year degree diploma into a period that brings out the practical nuggets for a young entrepreneur who's aspiring to get up and running. So I definitely agree with what you said earlier. We need to look at programs that is impactful, but that does add value. And the value, who determines that value? Ultimately, industry. If you don't have any customers anymore, they gave you a message. We don't need your business anymore. So how do you make sure you stay responsive, you stay on the cutting edge, and you respond to the real need, and you differentiate yourself? And it was said on the earlier panel, productivity and competitiveness. How do we drive innovativeness and competitiveness through our programs that meets the reality of the market out there?
Thank you very much. I think that's very clearly put. Well, gentlemen, I think our time is pretty much up. We've gone a little over, but I think we're okay with that. I would like to say thank you. It's always nice to hear that there is more than just the normal table talk, but that there are definitely actions and plans in place. And I think I want to challenge everyone who's watching today and who may watch later on as well, that don't just believe nothing is happening. I think it's important, you know, if you're not sure if there's something happening, ask the question. And perhaps that's what we should be teaching our youth as well, is for them not to immediately just assume there is nothing out there for them. I know that there is that message all the time, we hear it every day, but there is a lot going on and we need to celebrate it and perhaps correctly so market it better, get it out there and get it out to a broader population group as well, in terms of what it is that we are doing, why we're doing it, who's doing it, when it's happening. And agreed again, I think skills programs, although I'm a great believer in the full qualifications, skills programs are part of that parcel. And if nothing else, are then cheaper and quicker to get to than any of the other options that are out there for someone who's trying to get it on their own. I would like us to each, if you could all just give your own final opinion. My last question is a esoteric one. In a perfect world, if we didn't have to worry about anything, what would you do within your environment to encourage entrepreneurship, to build employment, to build those skills, and even if it's just the will for people to be able to look after themselves and then ultimately look after others? Yershen, if I could start with you.
Thanks, Gizelle. I'll be short, I know, because of time. I think for me, two key things. One is that we can no longer train for the sake of training. Training has to be accompanied by business growth. I think Abraham touched on that point. And for me, this means in an ideal and typical world that, you know, we should be focusing more on growing our small and medium enterprises, and especially our youth-owned small and medium enterprises. And that's one of the targets we've set. Our economic reconstruction and recovery plan has a target for 5,000 youth-owned and other SMMEs. And one of what we're trying to do as the Chemical CETA is to contribute in the next 5 years to supporting at least 1,000 of these SMMEs with skills programs for development. The other point I think just finally for me is success is a two-way street. Yes, you have rights, but you also have responsibilities. And I always say to young people, when you have access to Google the right things, not the wrong things. Google what opportunities are available for you. When you have that access, you're more likely, as you said, Gizelle, to find that there is a lot out there for you. But you have to actually have the right mindset, the right attitude, and actually seize the opportunities that are available there, that are out there for you. It's not going to come to you on a silver plate. So I think for me, as I said, it's a two-way street. There are rights and responsibilities. And for me, it's all about collaboration, more collaboration. And I think that's going to be the success factor in a resource-constrained environment. But again, if we had an ideal, typical world, I would say, you know, the multi-pronged approach of training together with enterprise growth. Thanks, Gizelle.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Simphiwe, last words from you?
Well, for me, it's the entrepreneurship. I think from an academic point of view, if I'm choosing the right word, I think from early schooling needs to be embedded in the curriculum. I think ideally we should not teach kids how to get an employment, but rather how do they create employment. And that's the first part. Then the second is that ideally is that manufacturing and consumption that is inward looking, without necessarily saying we live in an island and closed borders to the rest of the world. That is mythical. You can't close your borders. But then I think the manner in which we are importing stuff, I think we do import things that could even be manufactured here at home. I don't think we've got adequate confidence in our own abilities to do things. Ideally, we should be giving small businesses more of an opportunity to produce, to manufacture, and that would on the other side trigger consumption, which is internal, and keep what Chika Onika calls a spider web phenomenon, and keep the rand circulating as much more as it can within the economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, what a nice reference. And Abram, from you?
Thank you, Gizelle. I would just want to say that instill entrepreneurial thinking at the early age. Let's start very early with instilling entrepreneurial thinking in our young people. And as Mr. Thobela said, that we don't train for job seeking, but train for job creating. I think that we need to look at not just being successful, but adding ultimate value. And I want to end off with the words of Jim Collins, where he wrote in this book about how do you go from good to great. And one of the things he says in that Venn diagram, and that where's the partnership comes in for me with the seaters, with the corporate, is understand what you're passionate about. We all are passionate about, we all have a vision that gets us going every morning. So we need to understand what we are passionate about. We also need to understand what we are the best at, so that we can deliver quality ultimately. And when we understand what we're passionate about and the best at, let us look at how do we impact on the market. Let us then see how do we then make this world a better place for everyone. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I don't think I could say that any better than you. Yes, from me as well. I think your passion is what allows you to flourish. And that sense of gratitude that comes with everything connected to what we have. And I think if we look up every day and look at what we have, I read something interesting this morning that said, what are the two things you should be grateful for when you're working from home? Is you have work and you have a home. And I think that simply puts it in terms of that we can do this. We are a powerful, powerful nation. And I really do believe that we have a lot to give, and we are able to look inward for what we have. We have strengths beyond anything. There was always the concept of the African Renaissance, and perhaps we're a little later on with it than we thought we were going to be, but I do believe that it is coming there. Thabang, I think I'm handing back over to you now, if I'm not wrong.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ms. McIntyre, and also thank you to the panelists. That was a very engaging panel, and we look forward to having those inputs and see how they can contribute to inferring in the next discussion. So thank you very much for your time to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well then, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the first 14th, not even 4th, but 14th Leadership Skills Development Summit. You have been absolutely amazing. We have received your comments, your questions. Some of you have asked, how do you get in touch with some of the panelists and the speakers regarding some internships that are available? Don't worry, our team has got your back, and we'll be sure to apply, or rather refer you to the relevant parties that can assist you with your questions. I hope you still have been posting hashtag Skills Summit 2021, and you have had the opportunity and chance to visit our virtual exhibition. Without further ado, we wish to thank all our sponsors that made this event possible. Firstly, HRDC, which is the Human Resource Development Council. Also, we wish to extend sincere gratitude to Masabane Advisory Services, to Technology Innovation Services, and all of our exhibitors. Without you, this would not have been possible. Thank you to the speakers and also the contestants, as well as the participants for their time. But without you, the delegates, this of course would not have been possible. So we want to thank you, and please do tune in tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We will be here on the very same link, the very same platform, to kickstart day 2. I don't want to surprise you with what's coming up, but let me just give you a snippet. We'll be having a panel discussion on transitioning from secondary school to tertiary education. And we know that almost 50% of students who graduate from secondary school don't get to tertiary education. We're also going to be looking at creating sustainable technology and innovation for SMMEs. What are the initiatives and incentives available? And TIA, Technology Innovation Agency, will be leading that discussion. And last but not least, we'll be having a panel discussion on SMMEs at the heart of economic recovery. Do they possess the right skills? And we do know that by 2030, 90% of the workforce will be coming from SMMEs. So it's very important for us to gear them now to make sure that they are in alignment to the mainstream economy. I will use my famous word to conclude this summit. And we say being the best is great because you're always number one. But being unique is greater because you're the only one. I'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Don't forget to tune in. Take care.